Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to part 3 of Professor Victor Singing Eagle's brilliant lectures on Native American literature here at Sisseton Wahpeton College. And now, your host, the man himself, Professor Victor Singing Eagle! Yay! Ladies and gentlemen, we continue our discussion. We're back to where we left off. We're looking at Daniel Heath Justice's book, Why Indigenous Literatures Matter. And I was telling you that as opposed to what the late Lee Francis, my old mentor at UC Santa Barbara, used to call dominating culture, and my other mentor, the late Paula Gunn Allen, she would also say dominating culture, as opposed to saying, I don't know, Suyepi or Chmokmanuk or Washichu. Besides, they were Acoma Indians anyway. They would say dominating culture, dominating society defines literature this way. But we are tribal people, you see. We've got our own definition of what's good literature, what constitute literature in the first place. So I was reading from Daniel Heath Justice, and I referred you to page 1, but actually we should jump over to page 2, which is going to jump around a little bit. And I'm going to read a little bit again, and keep in mind that I do find professors annoying who just stand in front of class and read all the time. So we're going to jump around, and we're going to stop here and there. I'm going to look. All right, here we go. There are many stories about indigenous peoples alive in the world today. Some of these stories are our own. They give shape, substance, and purpose to our existence and help us understand how to uphold our responsibilities to one another and the rest of creation, especially in places and times so deeply affected by colonial fragmentation. Sometimes they're in our indigenous mother tongues. Sometimes they're in English or Spanish or French or other colonial languages. But they're still our good stories. Not always happy, not always gentle, but good ones nevertheless, because they tell the truths of our presence in the world today, in days past and days to come. Other stories are not so good. These are imposed upon us from outside. They belong to the colonizing populations that claim and dominate our homelands, populations from which many of us are also descended and with which we must navigate our complex relations as well. He's kind of talking about mixed blood, that mixed blood ancestry that a lot of us have. You guys know that I am a funny-looking Indian because I'm pretty much, what am I? Mostly Potawatomi, Crane Clan, runaway band, but I also have some Islander blood from the Pacific Islands. So that's why Moana kind of resonates with me, the cartoon Moana, or whenever I go out to the islands and mess around with the coconuts and palm trees, that resonates with me as well. On my mother's side, we're from the Micronesian islands. That's why we're like miniature Samoans. That's the best description. And on my dad's side, pretty much pure Potawatomi. Back to this book. So again, there's a little bit of that mixture he's talking about and a little bit of interplay in the stories and the literature. Let me keep reading. Many of the stories about indigenous peoples are toxic. And to my mind, the most corrosive of all is the story of indigenous deficiency. He puts this in italics. Let me read it again. Many of the stories about indigenous peoples are toxic. And to my mind, the most corrosive of all is the story of indigenous deficiency. What is it, you ask? Well, we've all heard this story in one form or another. According to this story, indigenous peoples are in a state of constant lack of morals, lack of laws, lack of culture, lack of restraint, language, ambition, hygiene, desire, love. This story presumes that we're all broken by addiction or dangerously promiscuous according to the pleasure-hating puritanical concepts of bodily propriety. It insists that we have a lack of responsibility, lack of self-control, lack of dignity. It claims that we can't take care of our children or families or ourselves because of constitutional absences in our character or biology or intellect. And it even goes further. Rather than see lower life expectancy, unemployment and education rates and higher rates of homelessness and substance abuse and suicide as being rooted in generations of sustained and intentional colonial assaults on all aspects of our lives and identities, we're blamed for our supposed lack of basic human decency. By the way, Professor Du Huawei, English, Harvey DeMars. I always give everybody Chinese names. I said that before. Du Huawei, Harvey DeMars, he calls it generational trauma. This idea that maybe it happened to our great-grandparents, something terrible, and they turn to alcohol, and it passes down from generation to generation. By the way, I don't drink. I'll tell you a quick story about that. I saw my grandfather and countless cousins drink themselves to death. As a little boy, I was a little like 5 years old, I saw this. I saw these people drinking themselves to death. So even as a little child, I was afraid. It's like, woo, I never want to touch this. And I never have, and I hopefully never will. Knock on wood. How are we doing on time? 7 minutes and 7 seconds. Not too bad. Now, I want to refer you to also page 5 of the introduction. A little bit more reading, and then we're going to knock it off, and then I'm going to refer you back to this and some of my notes, probably in part 4. We'll go to this. Let's see. This is page 5, page 4 and 5. No, page 5. Yet, stories can be good medicine too. They can drive out the poison, heal the spirit as well as the body, remind us of the greatness of where we came from as well. Or let me read that again. They can drive out the poison, heal the body the spirit as well as the body, remind us of the greatness of where we came from, as well as the greatness of who we're meant to be, so that we're not determined by the colonial narrative of deficiency. We're far more than that, though sometimes we need to be reminded, for indigenous people internalize the bad stories too. I've long been inspired by something my friend Alice Tepunga Somerville, a Maori literature scholar in, hope I can say this, Aotearoa, used to tell her Maori literature class at the start of each term. Remember that you are the descendants of gods. Often when I tell this story, I get a bit choked up, for it's a beautiful summation of a kind of certainty and presence that's sorely needed and far too rare. As I understand it, Professor Alice's statement wasn't primarily meant to build her students' self-esteem, although it no doubt did that. Rather, it was a clear reminder that they were an essential part of something great. Oh, I lost my space. Focus. Something great. Let me say they were a part of something great, something dignified and strong and worthy of reverence and respect. It was a fundamental expectation that they would hold themselves and one another to the highest possible standards. And they did. Love it. If you haven't gotten this book yet, you need to get it, because this is some good stuff, man. I'm telling you right now, and I'm probably already up to 10 minutes. How we doing? Yep, 9 minutes and 59 seconds. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to part 4. Talk to you later.